Well, good morning, CSC. How are you? How are you feeling? How are you being? It's so good to be here with all of you. I do have a few things to talk about this morning, and so we're going to just dig right in. Now, we've been in this series now, Thou Art That, for 3 weeks. In week 1, You Are the Living Mystery. We looked at the book and story of Ezekiel and the dry bones and the symbolism of that and how that story is an allegory. It's a symbol of the cycle of the sun coming from the winter into spring and coming out of that valley of darkness. Can life be brought back? In week 2, I get so emotional. That was Palm Sunday. And we looked at the symbolism of what's happening, what it means, the idea of Jesus walking into Jerusalem triumphantly on top of a donkey. And what we recognize is that animals in these stories actually represent our emotions. And so Jesus walking triumphantly into Jerusalem was a symbol of him having mastered his emotions. So often in our lives, we have our emotions, the donkey on our back, riding triumphantly into Jerusalem. So we talked about how we can shift that experience. Last week, Easter Sunday, the tomb was always empty. That powerful question from the men, the dazzling men, we can call them angels, to the women that went to the tomb. Why are you seeking the living among the dead? And we recognize that we do that so often in our lives where we're looking outside of ourselves for a savior when actually you came here to save yourself. And so if you're looking for the living among the dead, it's like looking into an empty tomb. It will always be empty. If you're looking for salvation in a relationship, it'll always be empty. If you're looking for salvation in a career, it will always be empty. If you're looking for salvation in a certain bank account balance, it will always be empty. And so we move forward. It's Earth Day, Earth Weekend, and there's so many celebrations that have been going on, and I'm sure many of you have been celebrating in different ways, and we had the powerful March for Science yesterday. And so I want to deal a little bit with this wonderful occasion and this wonderful time of the year. And as I was preparing, what came to mind, that there's a beautiful piece of news that came forward last month, actually, that in India, the Ganges River has been given the same legal rights as a human being. It's powerful. Powerful. We know that the Ganges River in India is considered a sacred river to over 1 billion people. And it has now been given the same legal rights as a human. It said in the article that this means that polluting or damaging the river will be legally equivalent to harming a person. Yeah. Now, the legal precedent for this actually comes from New Zealand and the Maori people, who actually had one of their sacred rivers declared in the same way, receiving the same legal rights as a person. And that is powerful news. It's beautiful news because we recognize, and we talk so often about our oneness, that we recognize that in truth, the rivers, the waters are living. And it reminded me of something that our brother Van Jones said in September. He was at a DAPL rally for the Dakota Access Pipeline. And he said this is as simple as I can say it. Water is life. Oil is death. Water is life. Oil is death. That's not hyperbole. What is oil? Oil is some stuff that has been dead for millions and millions of years. Oil has been dead for 60 million years. Coal has been dead for 150 million years. So we stand for life. Let's power a new civilization on a living sun, based on the living wind, based on the living imagination of our children, and based on the cleanliness and purity and the sacredness of our water. Powerful way to live, right? Powerful way to live. And so as that quote and that moment from Van Jones came back to my mind, it then brought me to where we want to go for today's message. We're going to turn to the gospel of Paulo Coelho. The book called The Alchemist. How many of us have read The Alchemist? How many of us know the story of The Alchemist? And as we're talking about Thou Art That and Thou Art That, inspired by Joseph Campbell, The Alchemist is one of our modern myths. We've dealt with some biblical allegories and some biblical stories, and that's wonderful. But I think it's important that we understand that the story didn't stop thousands of years ago. The retellings didn't stop thousands of years ago with ancient books. but we actually have modern texts that are giving us the same information. And so I want to go to the end of this story. Although Santiago, the shepherd boy, he takes a powerful journey and learns a lot through his journey with the alchemist. He finally gets to this place where he gets to demonstrate all that he's learned. And in demonstrating all that he's learned, he's actually fighting for his life because he and the alchemist have been captured by some warriors. And the alchemist, in his wonderful way, negotiated 3 days, telling them that this boy has power. And he has power over the winds, and he can demonstrate wonderful things. And so he says, this boy will demonstrate this to you, but I need you to give us 3 days. And so as we fast forward, we're at the moment now where he must demonstrate what he actually doesn't believe he knows how to do. He's freaked out, and he's like saying to the alchemist, why on earth would you tell these people that I know how to do this? You're the alchemist, not me. Right? And so as he begins this conversation, he first starts to have a conversation with the desert. And after the conversation with the desert, that leads him into a conversation with the wind. And from his conversation with the wind, then he has a conversation with the sun. And that's where we're picking up the story. And they're having a conversation about the soul of the world, and they're having a conversation about love. And he says this to the sun. You are wise because you observe everything from a distance, the boy said, but you don't know about love. If there hadn't been a sixth day, man would not exist. Copper would always be just copper, and lead just lead. It's true that everything has its personal legend, but one day that personal legend will be realized. So each thing has to transform itself into something better and to acquire a new personal legend. Until someday the soul of the world becomes one thing only. Now that idea, this is exactly what we were just talking about, this idea of getting involved in order to evolve. What's interesting is that all of us have had a personal legend, and what's interesting about that, you reach a plateau and then there's a call for something more, to become something new. You may start out as lead and move from lead to copper, and from copper, eventually you're going to find there's a call for you to become gold. But what's so interesting, and what I love that Paulo Coelho writes here, says that, and we acquire a new personal legend until someday the soul of the world becomes one thing only. Now, I love that. Because what Paulo Coelho is actually pointing us to is a fundamental spiritual truth and a fundamental scientific truth. If you've taken any time to read or look at quantum theory, quantum physics, you'll understand that there is a unified field theory. There is a unified field from which everything that is manifested in the being, first, all of the scientific laws, reduce down to one thing. But also, each and every one of us, although we appear in multiplicity, reduce down to one thing. Now, how is that true? Well, one, we can look at our human bodies. Do you know that you stand here as trillions of cells? Trillions of cells make up your human body, but yet when I see you, I only see one body. But you are trillions. And so similarly, this is the principle of correspondence at work. We have the same idea. And so we can actually reduce and actually contact this level of consciousness or the unified field. And there are a couple of attributes of this unified field. It is unbounded. It is unchanging. It is unmanifest, and it is eternal. And what's interesting to me about this field is it is not just a field that we come from, the plants come from it too. It's not just a field that the plants come from, but the planets come from. It's not just a field that the planets come from, but the stars come from. It's not just a field that the stars come from, but the suns and the moons come from. Everything that is manifested comes out of this unbounded, unchanging, unmanifest, and eternal field that we can call consciousness, that we can call source, that we can call the one, that we can call God, or that we can call even our highest self. Everything comes out of this place. And it's interesting and important for us to know this because when we're thinking about affecting our planet, when we're thinking about the ways that we want to live, as our dear brother Van Jones says, to develop a civilization based on the living sun, based on the living wind, based on the living imagination of our children, we have to first understand that we are all connected at the root to the same thing. Because if we were not connected to the same thing, we could not affect change in ourselves, collectively as humanity, but also with our planet. And we never lose that connection. This is what meditation invites us and allows us to experience. Meditation allows us to experience this unbounded, eternal, unmanifest, unchanging field that always is, that is like a hum, a vibration, and an eternal knowingness that always exists underneath and in back of everything at all times. And what I've learned and what's so beautiful, it doesn't matter where I am on the planet. It doesn't even matter where I am in my experience of thinking what I think is wrong in the world. I can still access that place because it is. And so when we understand that oneness, that unified field, that soul of the world that then becomes one thing only, we have to know that in order to affect change on our planet. And the reason why that's important is because right now, what's happening, and I'm a lover of all of the things that are going on. There's so much technology that's being brought to bear that can change our planet and that can take us off of energy that's not serving us, right? Go on YouTube for solar freaking roadways, right? It's this powerful technology that I love. Solar roadways are going to happen in our lifetime, right? That actually our streets will absorb sun and give us energy, right? And then it'll power our electric cars. And it'll power our homes. And energy could be free, right? There's so many wonderful things that are happening, and I love all of the technology that's happening, but there's something that's not happening. It's like seeking the living among the dead. We're only looking for external situations. We're only looking for external ways to fix a problem. But I just said that we're all connected by this unified field, which means that we're connected to the winds, we're connected to the seas, we're connected to the plants, we're connected to the air. And we have not taken the time to look within ourselves and ask the more profound question, not what technology can we create to fix this problem, but what is it that we need to change within ourselves so that we see a different experience outside of ourselves. It's the next part of the conversation. It's the spiritual part of the conversation, but it's a recognition of this scientific truth. This is why we have to have this conversation. And so the conversation with the sun moves on. Santiago says to the sun, that's what alchemists do. They show that when we strive to become better than we are, everything around us becomes better too. This is that within shows up without. When we strive to become better than we are, everything around us becomes better too. We can't just strive to make the picture outside of us better. We have to strive to become better, and then the picture becomes better. As within, so without. That's the principle. The principle is not as without, so within. Whatever's happening outside, then that's what affects you. See, that's how we live life, though, right? This happened outside of me, so I'm angry. As though you have no control over your emotion. As though you have no control over yourself. This happened outside of me, and now I'm depressed. You've simply forgotten the control that you have. There's nothing wrong with feeling or having the experience of depression. Please hear that. I'm not saying that. But it's a recognition, and this would actually transform our medical community. There's a recognition that we got to do the work within. Yes, yes. Okay. And so the conversation moves on. It's not love to be static like the desert, nor is it love to roam the world like the wind, and it's not love to see everything from a distance like you do, speaking to the sun. Love is the force that transforms and improves the soul of the world. When I first reached through to it, I thought the soul of the world was perfect, but later I could see it is we who nourish the soul of the world, and the world we live in will be either better or worse, depending on whether we become better or worse. And that's where the power of love comes in, because when we love, we always strive to become better than we are. It is we who nourish the soul of the world, and the world we live in will be either better or worse depending on whether we become better or worse. This is the true Earth Day message. Because in truth, all of the solutions are already here, right? Everything we need that can be implemented starting now already exists, that would completely transform our energy, that would completely transform the air that we breathe in. That already exists, but why haven't things changed? Because we haven't considered this internal conversation, that the soul of the world will become better or worse depending on whether we become better or worse. So we recognize that we have an opportunity, and really a mandate at this point, because it's becoming so critical, to go within and ask ourselves, where am I within my own being mirroring the chaos of the hurricanes and the crazy weather that's happening? Where am I mirroring that in my own life? Where am I mirroring in my own life that we go through the day? Sometimes you don't know what season it is, right? I always say you really have to look at the weather every day. Because there was a time when I was a kid, you knew it was December, you knew it would be cold, right? There was no question about that. You needed your hat, glove, and scarf, right? But we can have a 70-degree day in December. That's becoming the new normal, right? Where is that kind of chaos? Where does that exist in our own life? You don't know what season it is, right? Well, where are we forgetting who and what we are? Forgetting our name. Forgetting our holiness, forgetting our worthiness, walking through life acting like we're less than who and what we are, walking through life like we're not kings, like we're not queens, walking through life as though we're being judged and shamed and punished by a God outside of us. What if we begin to change that story within ourselves, and as we become better, then our world, the soul of the world, will also become better. Why? Because again, this is the principle, this is a scientific principle, because we're connected to this field. You recognize that as you're one body, we'll go back to this example, right? As you're one body. When you love on yourself, right? If you allow yourself and you go for a massage, right? Your whole beingness feels better from that one act. Yes, yes? Because there's a connection. Even if you just got a foot massage, your whole body, your whole self feels better just because your foot was loved on. Yes, yes? And so similarly, from the level of consciousness, and again, please look into the quantum theory. Don't take my word for it. There's this connection that exists at the smallest, most intricate, it's called the quietest levels of the mind and of self. And that connection, we're connected plant and animal, planet, sun, star, human being. We're all connected at that place. So what happens is when we make a change within ourselves, it literally affects the trees. When we make a change within ourselves, it literally affects the moon. When we make a change within ourselves, it literally affects the ocean. And again, we have to consider this. I say this again. We have all of the technology and the solutions already exist. But somehow it's not coming forward. Somehow there are obstacles. Somehow it's being blocked. Somehow the EPA is losing funding. Maybe it's not about the person that's in the White House right now. Maybe we need to look within ourselves to make the change. Because see, if we put it on who's in the White House, then we're in the victim story again. If we become better or worse, then the soul of the world becomes better or worse. And that's where the power of love comes in. Because when we love, we always strive to become better than we are. Now, I love that the word love is used. In this section, first, Santiago is speaking about the desert and the wind, it's not love to be static like the desert, nor is it love to roam the world like the wind, and it's not love to see everything from a distance. Love is the force that transforms and improves the soul of the world. Now, we all have an experience of love, and we know what that word is, but we get immediately when we hear love, we think about that emotional, syrupy, sweet sentimentality that we've identified as love. And so I want to clarify that. And in order to clarify that, I got to take us to another one of our modern myths, The Matrix, right? And in The Matrix, Matrix Revolutions, the third movie, which most people don't like, but it's powerful. We're going to do a series on the series. But for those that have seen the movie, you can remember in the third movie, we open finding Neo in limbo. He's caught between the machine world and the so-called real world, right? And he meets a man. He meets a man and his wife and their daughter, Kamala is his wife. And there's a conversation. And the man, his name is Rama. Ramachandra is actually his name. He's representative of the avatar of Vishnu, Ramachandra, who's considered one of the supreme beings. And Ramachandra is explaining to him what's going on with him and his family. And the situation is that they had a little girl, they had a daughter who cannot remain in the Matrix because according to the Matrix, unless you have a specific purpose, you can't be in the Matrix, in the machine world. And so this young girl was born out of the love between Kamala and Rama. And so they made a deal in order to keep her alive and so that she wouldn't be deleted as other programs were. And Neo found this sort of strange. He said, love? And Ramachandra said, I understand. You've never heard of a machine speak of love. And Neo said, well, no, it's a human emotion. And Ramachandra says to him, no, it is a word. What matters is the connection it implies. And so when we understand that what matters is the connection it implies, then when we hear these words through Santiago, when he says, and that's where the power of love comes in, because when we love, we always strive to become better than we are. When we understand the connection that it implies, we always become better than we are. When we understand our connection with the soul of the world, and that it matters how we live life, it matters how we show up in life, it matters whether we're kind or not, it matters whether we're easy or not, it matters whether we're gentle or not. It matters whether we're loving or not, first with ourselves and with others. Then the world changes. And not just our experience of the world, but the physical world changes. And so I want to leave you with this last thing. If you haven't heard, and hopefully you don't watch the news much, but the Surgeon General, who was appointed under the Obama administration, was just asked to resign as of Friday, Dr. Vivek Murthy. And he's a beautiful human being. He's a yogi, a very spiritual person. And he, of course, resigned without resistance and hasn't said much. But he posted something on Facebook, and there were 4 points he posted. And I want to share this last point because it brings everything together. Because again, we can easily get into the victim place, right? We know the policies that are being enacted by the current administration. They told us what they were going to do before they did it, and they implemented it. So we're not surprised, right? But we recognize that we cannot live as victims. And so the last point he shared is this. The world is locked in a struggle between love and fear. Choose love. Always. It is the world's oldest medicine. It is what we need to build a nation that is safe and strong for us and our children. This is the conversation. Love or fear? If we choose love, understanding the connection that it implies. If we choose love when we're thinking about our trees, our seas, our sun, it's the world's oldest medicine, and yet we won't take it. Then and only then can we embody the words from our dear brother Van Jones. Then we can use the living wind and the living water and the living sun. No longer dependent on fossil fuels, but dependent on life. Dependent on that which is living and life-giving. and continues to give of itself over and over again. On that, I invite everybody to stand. The world is locked in a struggle between love and fear. Choose love always. Choose love always, and that starts with self. Before you can run out and love on the trees, before you can run out and love on the fruits and vegetables and the animals, all of that's wonderful. Many times that becomes another external thing. We love animals and still don't know how to love ourselves. Right? No shade to the animals, I'm just saying. It starts with love of self. Because out of love of self and that understanding of that connection, then you can't help but love animals. From that love of self and understanding the connection that it implies, you can't help but love the trees. You can't help but advocate for those things that allow our planet to be here for future and future and future and future generations. And so we take a collective breath in and we release. The breath of God, the breath of life, the breath of joy, the breath of ease. We breathe in now, recognizing that this breath is our connection. It connects us to all life. We breathe in now because we recognize that every inhale and exhale that has ever taken place on the planet, all of those molecules still exist. And so as we breathe in the wisdom of Buddha. As we breathe in the wisdom of Jesus. As we breathe in the wisdom of the gurus and the avatars that have spoken this truth over and over and over and over again. From ancient times to modern times, we breathe in the connection. And we let it nourish us down to the cellular level of our being. Mother, Father, God, I am so grateful and thankful to know this connection. I am so grateful and thankful to bring my focus back to this connection. And I am so grateful and thankful that you have given us such an easy way to do it. Through our breath. For our breath is a symbol of life. Our breath is a symbol of ease. Our breath is a symbol of more than enough. We don't have to fight for it. Our breath is a symbol of how we are given to all the time. We didn't have to dot every I and cross every T. Our breath is a symbol. We woke up knowing that there would be more than enough. And so now we are grateful and thankful to remember this connection, not only through our breath, but our connection to the soul of the world. As we understand and we get involved so we can evolve, we understand our connection to you. We now understand our connection to the plants, the seas, the trees, the wind, the sun, and the planets. And so we make a declaration today, recognizing that as we become better, our planet becomes better. We make a declaration today and forgive ourselves and set ourselves free for any time that we did otherwise. We make a declaration to now shift who and what we are, so that our earth can shift who and what it is. We recognize now that the technology is here. We recognize now that the solutions are here. But what all of these things are waiting for is for us to show up as the loving human beings, the loving divine beings that we are. And so recognizing this connection, we love on ourselves and extend that love to the rest of the planet. We choose love always. We take the pill. For this, I am so very grateful. I release this word now with joy and thanksgiving and much expectation. And together we say amen, amen. Ashe. And so it is. So it is.